In this part of the lecture, we are going to focus on hunger and how that works. We know that in animals, they vary in their strategies of eating, in their eating behaviors. Predators generally tend to have larger digestive systems. Humans are a little bit different where we have smaller digestive systems, but we tend to eat a little more than we need. This was another example with animals, a picture of a python swallowing a gazelle, even though the gazelle weighs about 50% more than the snake. But interesting and cool how it could eat that. Anyway, back to humans. Hunger and eating behaviors seems to be a combination of learned and unlearned behaviors or factors influencing. We can think about, and we would have talked about this in class, that how eating behavior can be learned. And we can think about things we see on TV, commercials, ads. We can think about what we observe in our family growing up, what our family is eating, what our friends are eating. That can then influence us to choose those foods to eat. We can also develop some aversions to food. If you eat something and then you get sick afterwards and you develop an aversion to that particular kind of food. Eating behavior can also be unlearned to an extent. We can think about if we are given a limited selection of food, and if that's all we've got, even if we don't like it, but we're hungry, we're going to eat it probably to survive. And so then we can unlearn maybe that we didn't like that food after all. In terms of digestion and food selection, the function of the digestive system is to break down food into smaller molecules that the cells can use. So how this works, it's a process. So it starts in the mouth, you're eating something. Enzymes in the saliva help break down the carbohydrates. The swallowed food, travels down the esophagus to the stomach, where it mixes with hydrochloric acid and enzymes that digest the proteins. The stomach stores food for a time, and then a round sphincter muscle opens at the end of the stomach to release the food to the small intestine. The small intestine has enzymes that digest proteins, fats, and carbs. It is also the site for absorbing digested materials into the bloodstream. The blood carries those chemicals to body cells that either use them or store them for later use. Then the large intestine absorbs water and minerals and lubricates the remaining materials to pass as feces. And then this is a picture showing, again, starts in the mouth, you have some enzymes in the saliva, swallow the food, goes down the esophagus, goes into the stomach, is there for a while. Then you have a sphincter, and then passes from the stomach to the small intestine, the large intestine, and then some stuff comes out as feces. We know that many newborns survive on their mother's milk. We see this in animals. We see this in humans. We see that with mammals, a lot of mammals, once they're weaned, they're no longer producing lactase, which is an enzyme that is necessary to metabolize lactose. So we see this especially in mammals. Although humans do seem to be an exception, that many humans, even as adults, can continue to produce lactase, can continue to consume and metabolize lactose. Some people don't, though. Some people are lactose intolerant. So if they do consume milk after weaning, that can cause problems. That can cause gas, stomach cramps, diarrhea. There can be lots of not fun side effects. And again, one of the evolutionary perspectives on this is just that to make sure that you do wean at some point so that you can consume more substantial food that you're going to need to grow and survive. But we do see some variation across the world. We see in some parts of Europe and Scandinavia especially, people tend to have high lactose tolerance. They're more likely to enjoy milk and other dairy products throughout their lives. We see in other areas like Southeast Asia, these people tend to have lower tolerance, tend to drink or consume less dairy products, less milk, if any. Going back to the stomach and intestines and how you know when you should stop eating. So there's actually a lot of body parts that are involved with eating and digestion. So not just one mechanism involved, but a lot of different things going on. The main signal to stop eating is the distension of the stomach, where your stomach kind of puffs up a little bit. The stomach will send satiety messages to the brain about being full, about being satisfied, and will send through the vagus nerve and then also through the splenic nerve. The vagus nerve is going to send information about the stretching of the stomach walls, so it's telling the brain that, hey, we are stretching the stomach walls, and that's kind of along the lines of that distension of the stomach. The splenic nerves are conveying information about the nutrient content in the stomach to the brain. The duodenum is part of the small intestine and is the first digestive site that absorbs a significant amount of nutrients. The duodenum can be distended as well, or can become distended, and that's also related to feelings of satiety, feeling like you're full, things like that. The duodenum also releases the hormone CCK, which is involved with regulating hunger. One way it can do this or be involved with regulating hunger is by closing the sphincter muscles between the stomach and the duodenum, and also stimulate the vagus nerve, sending messages to the hypothalamus. One thing to keep in mind, CCK is a short-term effect. So unfortunately, it doesn't really help people who are trying to lose weight because it's too short-term. In terms of how the brain decides when to eat and how much to eat, it's looking at a few different things. So your hunger kind of depends on what's in your stomach, if anything. What's in your stomach, what's in your intestines, the availability to glucose to the cells, your health and body temperature are all factoring in when your brain is deciding, oh, is it time to eat? Especially the availability of glucose. We know that glucose is basically an important source of energy for the body, pretty much the only fuel that is used by the brain. We have insulin and glucagon, which can regulate the flow of glucose into the cells. So all of these are involved with letting the brain know that it's time to eat. The hypothalamus, so we've talked about hypothalamus is involved with many different things, and feeding is one of the processes involved with the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus is processing information about hunger, getting information from different parts of your body. The arcuate nucleus is a part of the hypothalamus that is really important. It's kind of the master area for control of appetite. And it's containing two sets of neurons. So one set is the neurons that are sensitive to hunger signals, and then the other set of neurons are neurons that are sensitive to satiety signals. The hunger-sensitive neurons are receiving information, receiving input from the taste pathways, and neurons that are releasing the neurotransmitter ghrelin. Ghrelin is something that is very much involved with appetite, with, ghrelin is released as a neurotransmitter in the brain and a hormone in the stomach. So especially if there is a period of food deprivation, ghrelin will be released. It will trigger some stomach contractions. It will act on the hypothalamus to increase appetite. And it can act on the hippocampus to enhance learning. Satiety-sensitive neurons include signals of both long-term and short-term satiety. So the distension of the intestine triggers neurons to release that CCK, which we mentioned before. Blood glucose can stimulate satiety cells, and body fat can release leptin, which stimulates satiety cells. And as we talked about before, CCK can constrict the sphincter between the stomach and the duodenum, making the stomach fill up faster, and can also stimulate the vagus nerve, sending signals to the hypothalamus that it's time to stop eating. Output from the arcuate nucleus goes to this other part of the hypothalamus, the paraventricular nucleus. The paraventricular nucleus, or PVN, is a part of the hypothalamus that inhibits the lateral hypothalamus, so another part of the hypothalamus. The lateral hypothalamus is especially, well, again, involved with hunger, and especially with making the hypothalamus think that it's full, think that it's satiated. The paraventricular nucleus releases melanocortin, sorry about that, a chemical that is important for limiting food take. If there is some deficiencies with this receptor, that can lead to overeating. Input from the hunger-sensitive neurons are inhibitory to both the PVN and the satiety-sensitive cells. So again, with hunger-sensitive neurons, they're trying to say like, hey, it's time to eat. With this part, the satiety kind of aspects and inhibiting the lateral hypothalamus, that's actually resulting in not eating as much, not wanting to eat as much. If there is damage to the PVN area, then the animal might overeat, which is what we see here. This is hypothalamus in some rats. So here's a normal rat, normal digestive system. And then here we have a rat that had his paraventricular hypothalamus chemically inhibited, so kind of messed with. And so the rat continued eating even though it had ate enough, even though the stomach and intestines were distended almost to the point that it was bursting, but kept on eating because it had that part of the brain damaged. Output from the paraventricular nucleus acts on the lateral hypothalamus. We mentioned before the lateral hypothalamus is very much involved with facilitating feeding. So it releases orexin, which increases animals' persistence in seeking food, as well as responds to incentives and reinforcement in general. And you can think about sometimes, even if you're not hungry, you'll eat if it's rewarding. Like even if you're not hungry and somebody presents you something really pleasant, like a hot fudge sundae or well, anything chocolate really, and you're just like, oh, chocolate, even if you're not hungry, but it is reinforcing, and so you'll go ahead and eat. The lateral hypothalamus contributes to feeding by detecting hunger and sending messages to make food taste better, arousing the cerebral cortex to facilitate ingestion, swallowing, and responsiveness to taste, smell, and sights of food, increasing the pituitary gland secretion of hormones that increase insulin secretion, and increasing digestive secretions. Okay, so that's the hunger part, and I'm going to stop here, and then the last part will be about eating disorders.